In our last video, we looked in the 300 block of Huron Avenue on the west side, and this is where the last theater we looked at, the Bijou Theater, was. But before we leave this block, I just want to kind of go to the east side and look at a couple things before we go to our next theater. This, of course, is Ben's today. Most of us remember it as Montgomery Ward's, and I always thought it was Montgomery Ward's, at least up until it became something different later on. I think there was Dave's in between that time. But I always thought the building was actually built for Montgomery Ward's, but I was wrong. Originally, Beard and Goodwillie, and later on Beard and Campbell, was at this location. I remember this headline from 1911, Great Fire in Heart of City, we looked at in a previous video. Well, it says loss into the thousands, but the heaviest loser was Beard and Campbell. It was so bad that they actually had to rebuild the building, and that's exactly what they did. In 1912, they opened their brand new building. So it wasn't built for Montgomery Ward's. It was built for Beard and Campbell. Notice that they wanted the public to know that this building wasn't going to burn down. It was fireproof. I just thought I'd throw this little tidbit in free of charge. Before we leave this side of the street, there's one more thing I want to cover with you. This space between Ben's and Firestone, the parking lot and the hardware store, most of that was the Union Hotel. We looked at the Union Hotel in video number 3. But since that time, I've gotten some additional information I thought was interesting. And what I found out was the St. Clair Hotel fire wasn't the only hotel fire in the block, 300 block of Huron Avenue. The Union Hotel also had a devastating fire. This fire took place in 1923. Not to be confused with the fire that took out the Beard and Campbell building in 1911. Fire in hotel imperils 25, all rescued. Loss is near $60,000. One man hurt. Firemen save block from complete destruction. That one man that was injured, it says here, was the man that jumped out of the second-story window and landed on the pavement. Most of the staircases were blocked by fire, and the windows on the Huron Avenue side afforded the best possible escape route, but this man couldn't wait for the firemen. On the left-hand side, you see some of the other businesses that were affected by this fire, mostly from smoke and water damage, but I was surprised to see the Coney Island back there, that location, 1923. And you can see that on the left-hand side where it says Coney Island hot dog stand, stock damage $100, no insurance. The article goes on to say the flames were confined to the second and third floor of the hotel structure, but the center section of the roof was burned away. As near as can be learned, the fire started on the second floor in one of the rooms and quickly spread to adjoining rooms, finally eating its way through the third floor. When the firemen arrived, fire was raging on both the second and the third floor. Most of the guests that couldn't escape by the stairs were taken down by ladders by the firemen. Then a search of the hotel was at once ordered by Chief Frank Schaller. Firemen went to every room in the hotel and with axes and picks went over all the debris. No body was found, and it is believed that no one is missing. The only problem with that, later on they found out someone was missing. 3 days after the fire, this was the headline in the paper. Dead of man found in Union Hotel ruins. Workman makes gruesome find. Search halts awaiting inquiry by coroner. The workman found this when he was cleaning up the debris. The body wasn't found at that time, but it was later. The fire was believed to have started in his room. The article goes on to say that a man's voice crying, "For God's sake, help me, let me out," was heard from this room in the story told by Floyd Sanderson, who rescued persons from the ruins until police forcibly prevented him from re-entering. In the previous article that we were looking at, it said that as the guests were taken from the burning Union Hotel, they were requested by Mayor John V. French, who was on the scene, to go to the Edison Hotel so that a complete checkup of the guests could be made. Some of the guests, however, escaped from the hotel, clad only in their night garments, and went to homes on Michigan Street and other nearby houses, where they were given shelter until this morning. When I was reading about the Edison Hotel, I realized that I never covered this in one of my videos. I did cover the Edison Hotel, but it was a different one. It was on the opposite side of the block, and it was a block up further in the 400 block. And so I thought now might be a good time to look at that. This is where many of the guests were taken. The Edison Hotel is set on the southwest corner of McMorran and Huron Avenue. This is what it looks like today, but back then, this is what the hotel looked like. This is the Edison Hotel. It used to be a home that was built for David Whitman. After that, it was converted into the Northwest Hotel, and after that, the Edison Hotel. The hotel also had a bar, a barber shop, and a dining room. And here's the menu from that dining room, at least for the purposes of this advertisement. They also had a lunchroom right next to the hotel called the Edison Lunchroom. We make a specialty of red hot served with genuine Mexican chili con carne. We also prepare chili con carne to serve in your home. So they kind of covered all bases. Today, this photograph is taken in front of McMorran, looking south to Huron Avenue and in front of McMorran Boulevard. But originally, the courthouse was in place of McMorran, and across the street, instead of seeing what you see now, you actually saw the Edison Hotel, which is in this photograph here. What you're looking at in the foreground is the fountain that used to be in front of the courthouse. And as we zoom in here, you can see the south side of the hotel. And if you look close, you can see the windows and shutters. In 1928, the Edison Hotel was torn down to make way for a gas station. I remember it as a Shell station that sold U.S. tires. And as we zoom in here, you don't get a real good look at it, but you're getting to get an idea what that gas station was like. I've always thought some of the most interesting things you'll see will be in the background of a personal photograph. I want to share one more tidbit with you before we leave this block. Remember, I told you after the St. Clair Hotel fire, all those buildings had to be rebuilt. And in the Sanborn map, you can see two of the buildings that we were looking at in our last video were already built. This was like 1911. The Electric Theater is where the Family Theater would be, and then the one just above that would be where the Bijou Theater would be, as well as Asmund Floral. But down below that, you see wide open space. Buildings haven't been built there yet. So what do you think they used that for in the wintertime? Well, maybe you guessed it, an ice rink. It was called the Central Ice Skating Rink. Open every afternoon and evening except Sundays. Admission 10 cents. Band night 15 cents. Band Tuesday and Friday nights. Sounds like a good time. Well, those are all the theaters that I can think of that were actually downtown. We have a couple more that were in the, well, let's call them suburbs of the great city of Port Huron. And one of those theaters was the Pine Grove Theater, which was up by the Thomas Street crossing. And it appears that Pine Grove Cleaners has gone out of business as well as the theater. But at one time, this is where the theater was. I covered this theater in video number 15, and I showed you a short video clip as we went by the theater, which is kind of neat to see if you want to go back and look at that. I did save a screenshot from it though, and this is the screenshot. This is the only picture I've ever seen of the Pine Grove Theater. You can see the canopy out front. And well, for years after, when the Pine Grove Cleaners took it up, they used that canopy for signage. That canopy is long gone now. This was taken in 1942. I haven't been able to find out much about this theater doing my research. I have a couple things that I'll share with you though. Here's something that looked like it was posted on the theater itself, or some type of advertisement for maybe the front of the theater, telling you what the shows were for that week, November 4th. And it goes down the line there and see some of the actresses that were in it. Clara Bow, Gloria Swanson, there's a name to remember. And in 1943, they had a fire in the theater. It doesn't appear to be serious. Being a small theater and not as profitable as the big theaters, when they ran ads, they were the smallest ones on the page. Sometimes it was like trying to find Waldo. Well, if you look carefully and we zoom in here, you can see it. All right, that's all we have on the Pine Grove Theater. But before we leave this area, just take a look here and we'll go across the street to Ernst's Camera Shop. And this is what it is looking like today. Zoom in here a little bit. Very nice building, but it wasn't always a camera shop. At one time, it was the Michigan National Bank. The very latest design in banks, at least in 1956. This is what appeared in the paper that year. Michigan National's newest drive-in bank. Grand opening today. Favors for all. 3 drive-in windows and regular facilities inside. And they give you a map as well. This was the adjoining page, and it shows the inside of the bank. It shows the external teller window. It shows the outside of the bank. And it gives a little history about it. One of the things it says is that it replaced a 33-year-old bank that was on the north end. It's set right on the triangle corner. And if you look at the area today, it would be right where this parking lot is. And this is what the bank looked like back then. For those not familiar with the area, this would have been on the northwest corner of Thomas Street and Pine Grove Avenue. The North End branch was a sister bank to a bank that was built 2 years prior in 1954 on Connor Street. And they had a very similar advertisement in the paper, as you can see here. And they had a very similar adjoining page as well. The South Park Bank was located on Connor Street between Electric Avenue and Military Street. And you can see from this photo what's there today is a Dollar General. But an amazing thing happened when I went up to look at the satellite view. Obviously they hadn't updated it yet, so it still showed the bank. And here it is. You can see from these 2 photographs that the bank certainly had a lot of extra parking. I mean, there was nothing there. Alright, there's one more thing we want to look at before we bring this video to a conclusion, and that's to correct a mistake I made in video 16. It was the first mistake I've ever made. I'm 80 years old, and so it's quite a record. Well, you believe that, I've got a bridge I'd like to sell you as well. Anyway, from the railroad tracks to the funeral home, It's a pretty large area, and this was before McGill Coal Yard, was a building that was originally occupied by Stevenson Carriage Company. And you can see it on this pictorial map. This was actually the second carriage company that was at that location. The first one was destroyed by fire. Disastrous fire. The Joe L. Stevenson Carriage Works burned Thursday evening, lost about $15,000 with $9,000 insurance. Well, Mr. Stevenson did rebuild into a very fine building. This building that you see in the pictorial, you see that tower there on the corner? Well, here's a better picture of it. This was the same building that the Stevenson Carriage Company was in, but it was taken over when the carriage business went out of business by American Machine Company. During World War I, they made munitions for the troops. It had a pretty distinct tower facing Pine Grove that sat on the corner of the building. And in this picture here, I realized exactly where my mistake was. I was thinking it was on the opposite corner, but you can actually see it here. As we zoom in, you can see that tower. And in 1918, this was what was on the front page. Fire destroys big munition plant Sunday. Oil tank boils over, explosion spreads flames. Structure of American Machine Corporation is today a mass of ruins. Will continue business. And continue business they did. At the very same location, they built a brand new plant. However, we don't have a photo of that plant. Two massive fires at the same location. I don't know if I'd build another plant there. All right, let's go back to the corner I thought it was on, and number 16. It was on this corner here. I have found out what was on that corner since I did the first video on it, and I do have a couple of photographs. It was a modern milling company. In many of their advertisements, you saw them advertising white drake flour. It was pretty big with that company because they even put it on their building. The home of white drake flour. You can see the railroad tracks running alongside of it that are still there today. And over on the right, you can see the old feed knitting mill. Here's another photograph where you can see their customers out in wagons in the front of the building. Well, join me in my next video and we'll continue our little trip around looking for the theaters of Port Huron.